Now, if you don't realise, in actual fact, that's where I live. I don't know if you can see it. Yes, I think you can. There's an island across the lake there. And I come across in a boat, and I generally film here. I'm doing a series now about curious things. I think that's a rather curious idea in itself, don't you? As opposed to something really funny. Anyway. This week I want to talk about the man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. In 1925, all the major scrap dealers in France were gathered together in the top Parisian hotel at the time, Hotel Carillon, for a meeting with a man they knew nothing about. It turned out that a Monsieur Lustig was in fact the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Post and Telegraphs, and he was there to announce to these scrap metal dealers that the government had decided to pull down the Eiffel Tower. The reason being that it had become a bit of an eyesore for a lot of Parisians at the time, and there was a rising cost of repairs. So the Eiffel Tower, that was originally built for the 1889 exposition in Paris, was to be pulled down. So the sort of tonnage involved of the sheet metal was given to the sheet metal scrap dealers, and they were taken on a limousine to the Eiffel Tower, taken on a tour up the Eiffel Tower, and Monsieur Lustig at the end announced that the winning tender would be announced in 4 days' time. So they all departed, rather curious about the whole thing, of course, and most definitely looking forward to putting in the winning tender. 4 days later, a Monsieur P was told that in actual fact he had won the tender, and he was to bring 250,000 francs, which was about $1 million at the time, to a hotel in 2 days' time as a deposit in order to secure the bid. So he turned up at the hotel. Of course, he had a few doubts. He was wondering why on earth, if it was a governmental project, it was not how the meetings were not held in a government office somewhere rather than a hotel. And he also wondered, of course, why there were no other colleagues of Monsieur Lustig involved. Why had he not talked to anyone else from the government? He had dealt with government officials before, of course, however, and he knew very well that typical characteristic of a government official was that they liked a little greasing of the palms. So when Monsieur Lustig started mentioning that his wife needed a new fur coat, that he had worked rather hard in his job and was fairly tired and underpaid, he realized that in actual fact he was dealing with a government official for certain. So he paid Monsieur Lustig a bit of a bribe of a couple of thousand francs, and he paid the 250,000 francs to secure the tender. Then he departed, and he waited a few days to hear for further correspondence from the government. Of course, he heard nothing, and then he started to become worried. He then inquired, and of course there was no Monsieur Lustig as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Post and Telegraphs at all, and the government had no plans at all to pull down the Eiffel Tower. He had in fact been taken for a ride, and he lost an enormous amount of money and he was so embarrassed that he didn't tell anyone. He didn't go to the newspapers or anything. He didn't go to the police because he was so embarrassed, and it would certainly have ruined his reputation as a businessman in France. So, Monsieur Lustig got away with it scot-free. In fact, 6 months later, he did it all again for even more money, the equivalent of $1.5 million. So there you go. One of the biggest scams in history actually repeated by a Monsieur Lustig. Well, there you go. That's this week's curious story. Perhaps you can tell me who Monsieur Lustig really was. And, yeah, anything you'd like to mention, go ahead and leave a comment. Please also rate my video. Now, if you haven't already, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but do subscribe. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. I'm going back to my island now, and cheers. See you next week.